so everyone knows. Some of the people, there were some people asking if it'll be recorded and they can watch it because they couldn't make it tonight. I am going to record it and happy to share it. Thanks everybody for coming tonight once again. My name is TK Kugler, and I am the founder and managing partner at Wasabi Venture Stables. And this is our first ever annual, which I hope is annual, review of the previous year of how our operations went and what our plans are for the new year. For those of you who may not be club members, Wasabi Venture Stables was born at the very beginning of 2017. Really a lifelong dream and aspiration of mine to build a really world-class racing stable. And we kicked off in 2017, the start of that journey. To make it even more fun and interesting, I married some of my startup thinking, and as a way to get more people at a very low and transparent and risk-free way of being owners, we opened up the possibilities for created a way, so almost a crowdfunding approach to horse ownership, and it's been very successful. We have a very active and fun group of club members from the first year, and I think and we'll talk a little bit more about that and how that changes in going forward with some of our other plans. So with that, I will kick off just operationally for tonight. Once again, everyone is on mute at this point, just so that we don't have lots and lots of background noise. If you want to ask a question, don't hesitate to use the chat functionality that's built into it. Feel free to kick out a question, and I'll try to answer questions as they come up, and you know, make it very interactive. For those of you that may be just on a phone call, and so you may not have the chat functionality, I will attempt at the end to open it up and open up everybody's. I will give everybody a warning, so if there is a lot of background noise wherever you are, you can mute yourself very quickly. But for everyone else, I'll give everybody a chance to open up and ask a verbal question as well. So with all that, let's jump in, and we're going to really look and review 2017, and hopefully everyone can see my slides, which I think you can. So. We're gonna start by reviewing sort of by the horse, if you will. So we had 24 horses come through on. Take a quick second. Somebody is, but there they are. We had 24 horses come through our stables in 2017, and 16 of them we claimed. 4 came from auctions, 4 from private sale, 3 were 2-year-olds, 2 of which got to races, and 1 was a yearling. Our average price that we paid was $13,065. We had what's this next stat, which is an interesting stat, is we had 8 of our horses were either profitable or operationally positive. Now, operationally positive, for the accountants in the room, is not a real accounting term, so I'm going to define it for you. What that means is that the horse is probably still running for us, first of all, and second of all, had to have raced at least 3 races for us so far. So take out the yearling and take out the 2-year-old that has not raced. And in addition to that, what that operationally positive part means is that they're actually cash flow positive, meaning that the horse has earned more money than it has cost on ongoing fees or ongoing expenses. Now, for those of you who are club members and those of you who are wondering, hey Bob, I'm gonna mute you again. Try not to unmute yourself. So, for those club members, and they know this already, but for those that are not and are on the phone, none of our club members pay any ongoing expenses. We kind of settle up at the end of a horse, but if the horse loses money, that's all on Wasabi Venture Stables. It is not on our club members who pick out their pieces of their horse. Once they pay their initial piece of the horse, from that point forward, they have no ongoing expenses and they have no ongoing bills. And if the horse loses money, they never have to pay another dime either. So it's kind of a risk-free way the minute you put your initial money in to be an owner. And so actually, I feel really quite good about that 8 of our 14 that qualify by the definition that I just mentioned to you have been positive. For those of you who have ever been in syndications or owned your own racehorses, that's a pretty good ratio. And so we feel really good about that for our first year. 13 of our horses are still actively racing for us. That obviously does not count the yearling, which obviously yearlings don't race, which is now a 2-year-old, by the way. By the member. So we entered the year with 0 members. So we were a brand new operation and we had no members. We have 83 active members. 17% of them, 14, have bought into 5 or more horses. So very active. 37 have bought 0 or 1 horse. 78 people have never been a part of a horse racing syndicate before. This is a really important stat to me personally. One of the reasons why we run the club and why we do what we do is that I'm a firm believer, and if you Google some of the things that I've written in different publications, I believe one of the biggest things that racing needs is more owners. And so having 78 people, 64 people, 78% of our members this year who have never, ever been a part of a horse racing syndicate, that's good for the sport, and it actually creates a really fun environment for us as well. On the track, we had 11 wins this year. If you look over my shoulder, if you're looking at the video of me, you'll see our winner circle pictures behind me. But we had 11 wins with 8 different horses at 6 different tracks. For those of you who may not know us as much, we are mostly a mid-Atlantic operation, meaning New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, West Virginia, Maryland operation. We also race in Florida. We actually had a horse race today in Florida. Thanks, Mom. Ran a really game 4th, if anybody didn't happen to see the race. Ran a really, really game 4th, and we were pretty darn happy about it. So we earned $238,000 in purse money. 13.4% were in the winners of our starts. 40.2% in the money, and 52.4% we were 4th or better. Interesting stat is we have not had a horse finish less than 4th since November 20th, as a matter of fact. So we've had a pretty good string. We haven't had any wins actually in that stretch, but we're 4th or better. And if you know anything about the racing business, if you can consistently run 4th or better and hit the money, you're paying your bills. Of course, everybody loves the wins. But you know, if you can pay the bills, that's kind of how this game gets played. I put this note in here. It's hard to measure, and I wouldn't, you know, stand up and jump up and down about it. But we may be the most successful new owners on the East Coast, or at least in the Mid-Atlantic. And once again, probably there may be people, if they were on the phone, would say, hey, we're a new operation. But if I look at all the statistics, and I tried very hard, it's not easy to get statistics on this and lots of different ways to measure it. But people who are in the industry and have been for a long time kind of backed me up and said, yeah, you could make a claim that you were one of the more successful sort of mid-Atlantic new operations. So anyway, an interesting stat, or at least an interesting claim. How's that? I thought I'd throw in here our horse of the year. It's a horse named Feel Proud. Feel Proud's actually in to run on Saturday at Laurel. We claimed Feel Proud for $5,000 on August 27th at Timonium. The backstory here is that in many ways this was a horse that lots of people thought was a silly claim at the time. I actually had some people tell me, wow, not the greatest claim that you're ever going to do. We thought that we had a chance to do something with this horse. We switched him to distance on the turf. He had never really run at the distance on turf, 2 turns on turf, and we had some great results with him. In 5 starts, we have 2 wins, a second, and 2 thirds. He's earned just under, sort of $50,000 in money. And he finished 3rd place in a stakes day on Maryland Millions Day. And frankly, if he had had a little better trip, he had a really good chance to win that day, but did not have the greatest of trips. So interesting enough, he was the 2,944th rated horse in winnings in North America in 2017. Not bad for a horse that we claimed for $5,000 and was told by many people, including some other trainers that I know, wow, you probably didn't claim a great horse there. So we're really proud of Feel Proud, and there's no pun intended in the name there. So, and hopefully he shows even some more flexibility when he runs in a sprint on the dirt in a Maryland bred allowance race on Saturday. So we'll see how that goes. Let me just check and see real quick to see if I had any questions. So I haven't seen any questions pop up, so I guess we're okay. And there are 17 people on the line, which is great. Let's talk about 2018. Goals for 2018. We're going to greatly expand our operation. Our goal is 50 horses through our barn in 2018. We're going to stay concentrated on the Mid-Atlantic area. So Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, Maryland, West Virginia, with a really big focus on Maryland. I grew up in Maryland. If you know anything about the racing business in Maryland, it's on a really big uptick, and there are real great financial reasons to concentrate your efforts in Maryland. Doesn't mean we won't be running horses in the other jurisdictions that I mentioned. Also, we will probably hopefully sneak a horse or 2 into Saratoga this year, which is, if you'll notice, a bullet a couple places down there. We're going to think about, right now, some of our thinking is to concentrate our activity on yearlings, our auction activity for the year. Would love to add 6 to 10 yearlings this year. Just some thinking that we've been doing. We enjoy the yearling that we have. We're very excited and hopeful that she will, she's a street magician filly who now has a name, by the way. We just officially got her name this week. Her name is Old Line Magic. She's a Maryland bred. Maryland's the old line state, and she's out of Street Magician, so it's called, we came up with the name of Old Line Magic. But anyway, we really enjoy the yearlings. We enjoy the auction process. We'll be looking to hopefully do a little bit more with that this year. Like I said, targeting 6 to 10 yearlings. Does that mean we won't do 2-year-olds? No. If you'll notice, I'll talk a little bit about that too. It's possible to do some. Will we do any breeding this year? No, it's not on the list to do any breeding. Doesn't mean we won't at some point, but it's definitely not on the target. Will we not do weanlings this year? Probably not. Not in our target list this year. But we are thinking about some yearlings. We'd like to add 300 new club members this year. Think about it, we're close to 100 right now. That's a tripling, quadrupling our size, tripling the number that we got this year. But we think that's a really good growth for the company and the industry. And we think we're serving the greater good of the industry in many ways. We're hoping to have at least one horse run on Haskell Day. We have quite a few New Jersey members, and I threw this in and say, hey, we're going to give it a crack. If we can get a horse and get a chance for it to run at Haskell Day, we're going to make a run for it and see if we can do that. We'd like to have at least one horse run at the Saratoga meet. For those of you who have never been to Saratoga or the meet there, it really is something special. It's probably very unique in the United States of racing, and it really is kind of a 8-week long festival, or 10-week, I think now, long festival of excitement. And we'd love to get a horse up there and have it run at the Saratoga meet in New York. It's a goal we put out there. The next one's a big one. We had 3 horses run this year in Maryland Million Day. For a first-year operation, that's a really good story, honestly. I'd like to get the number up to 5 this year. You have 5 horses run on Maryland Million Day. So we'll see how that goes. We'd love to be in the top 10 owners in purse money in the Mid-Atlantic area. Once again, very hard calculation to figure out. It's not as easy as you might think to calculate that, but it's a goal we'd like to shoot for. Add a partnership or 2 with other racing stables. We have had really a great relationship with Kenwood Racing. We love working with them, and we're going to continue to do that. We may add somebody else that we over time where we work with, and I expect us to continue working with Kenwood. What that does is allow us to have more horses and sort of spread our potential to sort of get to that target of 50 horses running in our barn this year. And then the last thing is we'd love to get 2 horses placed in stakes this year. I'm not talking necessarily black type stakes, but state bred stakes or non-graded stakes. I'd love the opportunity for us to get 2 in a placement. One of our members, Gary Quill, who I don't know if he's on the line or not, but Gary, I had shared our goals with him, and he said, wow, those are aggressive goals. Yeah, they're aggressive, but I think they're reasonable and possible. Some of them may be stretch goals, and I'm hoping, we reach them. But I'm also open to calling audibles as the year goes on and as opportunities come along. We're a new operation, but I think we've been pretty successful. And I think other people who are in this business have looked around and said, well, you've been pretty successful for a new operation, and we like what you're doing. So we try to be honest and transparent, and that's a key thing that we are. So anyway, that's the most of the presentation. I did not see any questions pop up. I'll give people a couple seconds if they want to type a question. Like I said, I'll also, in a second, I will unmute everyone, warning you now, in case you got a dog barking in the background or something. It's always dangerous when you do these webinars. You never really know. But give everybody a chance to verbally ask a question if they don't type a question here. Neil asks, who are your trainers and how do you pick them? Great question, Neil. I'll start with who our trainers are. We actually have a variety of trainers, Neil. Most of our trainers are based at the tracks that we run at. So we kind of have right now, we generally have a trainer at each track. In some cases, we have 2. For example, at Gulfstream today, we have horses. Actually, right now, we only have horses with Ronnie Spatz at Gulfstream. And those are in our partnership with with our partnership at Kenwood. We've had horses with Jane Sabelli as well, who's right now, she's based at Gulfstream for the winter. We've used a couple different trainers in the Maryland circuit. We use Mark Salvaggio is our primary trainer at Penn National. So we look at a bunch of them, and we kind of my grand vision, to be honest with you, I'll be transparent. One of the things that we really envision doing is creating almost like a team approach to training. It's down the road, and I won't talk too much about it because it's still sort of in the incubation thinking phase. But it would, if it can work, it'll be kind of interesting and revolutionary. But to answer your question, how do we pick them? We interview them like we do any other job, and we ask other people, and we're not afraid. You know, sometimes if you pick a trainer and have to fire a trainer, we've had to do that at times too in our year. But it's an interview process and asking other folks. But it's a great question for sure. Let's see here. Can you explain? Alan asks, can you explain the qualifications required for horses who are state bred to be able to have their tag waived? Sure. That's a kind of a very specific question, but I'll try to answer for you. Is if there are certain races in a condition book, and the condition book is sort of like I actually have one right here. It's put out by the track. This is Laurel's condition book, and it tells you the conditions of a given race. And so, for example, what it'll say is, hey, this is a maiden claiming race for $40,000, but if you're Maryland bred, you can waive the claim. You don't have to put in for a tag. And it'll say it right in the conditions, and that's why it's called a condition book. The conditions of the said race are sort of what it says. So that's kind of how you get to waive a tag there. There are other places where you can waive a tag around sort of, for example, if you had a horse that's coming back and hasn't raced in 6 months, you can often waive the tag then as well. You sort of get a race to get a conditioning, physical conditioning of the horse back. So that's kind of what happens. Hopefully that answered your question. Neil asked another question. What happened to the 10 horses that are no longer in your barn? Neil, some of them we sold. That's standard process. We sold them to other people, when they didn't fit our goals anymore. Second, some were, Neil, if you remember from the earlier stats, some were sold for a profit and some weren't. So some have been claimed away. We're a claiming operation primarily. So you have horses run and they get claimed away. We had one claimed away maybe a month ago. We had claimed it. It raced in one race and it got claimed away. That's kind of how claiming works. So in some cases, you hope the horse gets claimed, and some you don't. We've actually done quite a few webinars on sort of how claiming works. So, and in a couple of our horses, we've retired. We try to make sure we find very safe homes for them. But when you got to run this like a business, and sometimes when you find a horse that isn't going to turn a profit, you find a safe home and a good second career for it when you can. And that's what we've done with a couple of ours. I think we've only one turned into an exercise horse. One became basically a pet. So it's kind of how we approach it. So hopefully that answered your question, Neil. Tim asked, can Nancy R still be claimed by another stable? So for those of you who don't know, Nancy R is one of our horses. We claimed, sure, it could be. Absolutely could be claimed, Tim. It's part of how the claiming operation works. Right now, Nancy is actually is one of those cash flow positive horses, by the way. We claimed her for $10,000 and she's done a steady drumbeat of running seconds and thirds. So it's been a win. Alan asked, when you are claiming future horses, do you prefer to grab ones who are moving up in class, dropping down to a lower class, maybe another scenario? Alan, great question. The short answer is all of the above. Every situation is kind of different. For those of you who have questions about the claiming, I will, if you check in our YouTube channel, we actually did an hour-long webinar just about claiming and how claiming works and how we look at claiming. It's a very interesting webinar that we did earlier this year. But the short answer, Alan, is we kind of look at all of those. You know, we actually looked at a horse today for a possible claim, and we didn't do anything with it, but we actually studied it and looked at it and did some research on it. So there's a whole process that kind of goes into the claiming exercise. Honestly, claiming is one of my favorite parts of the game. I really enjoy doing it. Elizabeth asks, can you tell us what the typical day rate is for your trainers? I know they vary from track to track and trainer to trainer. Yeah, so I can't really tell you what the typical is. I will tell you we range anywhere, candidly, from $40 a day all the way up to $85 a day, depending on the track and the trainer and the situation. We actually, you know, so I guess that's the best I can tell you as far as but it's a wide array. It's part of the interviewing process too, Elizabeth. For those of you, for edification, for those of you who are on what the day rate is, a day rate is what a trainer charges for you to have the horse with them and for them to train it. It's kind of like the upkeep charge. And like I said, we range, I think we may be as low as have been as low as $35 a day, depending on the track, and as high as, like I said, as 85. Day rates can go as high as 200, you know, with certain trainers, or even more I've seen. But that's all part of kind of what we negotiate and interview about. Any other typing questions? These have been good questions, kind of all over the place. Any questions about sort of our goals and dreams? Oh, I guess I did a good presentation and they were all pretty clear because the questions weren't around that. I'll give another 30 seconds or so to see if anybody asks a typed question before I open up the unmuted lines there and give people a chance. Any timelines for the goal, Jake asks. Great question, Jake. Those are kind of year-long goals. If you'll notice some of the goals, if you kind of look at, I'm still sharing my screen, but if you'll notice, like, obviously, Maryland Million Day is in the fall. It's in October, so you know we won't know if we reach that goal. Haskell Day is sort of in late summer, you know, time period. Saratoga's in the summer. Reaching 300 club members is an all-year goal. It's going to take us sort of that effort to get there. But most of those goals, I would say, are year-long goals. Neil, what about the Preakness meet? Well, let me ask. I skipped a question. Let me. Chris Eldridge asked, what tactics are you using to try to get up to 300 members? That's a great question, Chris. I'll tell you, what we have found. We've done some advertising, and you know, I come from a sort of digital media world, so I do that. We do webinars. We do webinars like this. But what I have found, and what we have found to this point, and we are going to encourage it with some stuff, is that word of mouth is the best sales tool. Probably no different than a lot of other businesses. So we're running something right now. If you sign up and become a club member, by the way, it's $99 lifetime membership, gets you into the club, and it also, that $99 is credit towards whatever first horse you choose. So it's net, it costs you $0 to be a member. If we will give you a $20 credit back, and anybody that referred you gets a $20 credit that they can use on a future horse. So just trying to encourage that sort of word of mouth tactic. But that's some of the stuff. We're going to probably try to do some more advertising. We're looking actually at doing some advertising at the racetracks themselves. You'll probably see some of that this year as well. Neil asked about the Preakness meet. Yeah, Neil. It's not really a goal to run on Preakness Day yet. Most of those are stakes races and high-level stakes races. I'm not sure I'm not making that a goal. Is probably a tough sell. Elizabeth asked, "What auctions are you targeting for yearlings?" Still yet to be determined. The auctions come a little later, Elizabeth, in the year. We did the Fazig-Tipton auction. That's where we got the one yearling we have. We'll definitely be at that one because it's a heavy mid-Atlantic selection of horses, yearlings. But it's not out of the question that we're in Ocala or, Keeneland even as the year goes on. We'll see how the year goes. Jasper, can you give a brief update on the horses? 13 horses. It's hard to do an update on all 13, Jasper. The only thing I can say is if you check out our website, we try to put updates on the website in our horses section. And if you're a club member, hopefully if you're on our Slack channels, we do updates a lot there. Hard for me in this setting to do updates on all 13 horses. Sorry. Alan asked, what are you looking for prospective partnerships with other racing stables? I will tell you that the key for me, Alan, is honest people. I want honest people who I can work with. Probably no different than you want in any other business. I'm really looking for people I like working with, who I believe in what they're doing, who treat the horses well, who probably have the same aspirations and dreams we do and see the business the same way we do. I know that might sound a little vague, but that's really what I'm looking for. Honesty and transparency and trustworthiness are probably even more important than anything else. Obviously, if they've done well and they're good partners and have a history of success, that's great as well. But in some cases, I'm even secondary to that, to being honest and trustworthy. Jake mentioned, maybe having tables and booths at a track. Definitely something we've talked about for sure. Fantastic questions, by the way. Really appreciate them for sure. I am going to, we're at the sort of 7:30 mark. I am going to do the craziness, and I am going to unmute everyone. So when I unmute everyone, just so you know, if you've got a lot of background noise, everybody's going to hear it. So we're going to try to unmute everyone to give people a chance to ask questions verbally, and we're going to see how that turns out. If it gets crazy and there's tons of noise and no one can hear, I'm going to mute everyone again, and we will try to make it work. This is what you call flying by the seat of your pants when you do this. But sometimes you just got to take a risk. So at the count of 3, I am going to unmute everyone. Once again, if you are someplace really loud, please mute yourself. If you're on the phone and you're really loud, please mute your phone. And actually, if you're not going to ask a question, please mute yourself. So 3, 2, 1, I am unmuting everyone. All right, I have unmuted everyone. So if you have a question and would like to ask in a verbal fashion, I am ready now to take you.
Hi, TK. This is Tony.
Hey, Tony.
I just had a question. I don't know if you saw it when I had typed it in. Just wanted to see how no texting was doing, how the horse is feeling after the operation, and just wanted to
Yeah. I kind of skipped the question intentionally, Tony. Yeah, just fine is the short answer. So I'll update offline.
Sounds good.
So I didn't hear the question though.
Okay. I have another question.
Yes, sir.
Like when I see you'll possibly have a horse running at Haskell Day or the Saratoga meet, will there be any events to get the members together at those races? Yeah,
we've done that. We have done that quite a bit. We had a nice little crowd when we ran at Suffolk this year, which is up in Massachusetts. So we had a nice crowd that day. Had a really great day, actually. It was really fun, and So that was fun. We also had a couple of the people I see on the line actually were at that day, so that's fun. We usually have a nice little crowd when we run in Maryland as well. We usually announce when we're going to actually try to get people together. We also had a really nice Kentucky Derby party this year and had a really good crowd. Not at the Kentucky Derby, but we actually all got together in actually in New Hampshire, of all places. Well, not all places, because that's where I live. But we had a nice little crowd there. But we tried to do in-person get-togethers on a regular basis, for sure.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Yep, no problem. Any other questions from folks on out in TV land?
Yeah, random question.
Hi.
Random question. How are you constantly traveling from New Hampshire down to Maryland and across all the other racetrack circuits? Because on Slack, you're like, hey, I'm in Canada today. And then yesterday you were in Maryland. Yes. And the day before that you were in New Hampshire. Like, are you going on a private jet, or are you driving? Which do you have a teleportation device? Yeah.
It's I have a broom or something. No, great question. I fly a lot. It's not a private jet, but I do fly a lot. I fly around a lot. I've flown around a lot. Me personally, in my life, I've been to all 50 states and God knows how many countries if I was going to count them up. But no, I fly around a lot, and I would say the other thing that's very interesting, from where I live in New Hampshire, I can catch a flight and be at Laurel at a track within about a 3-hour window on a commercial flight. So I wouldn't say that I set my life up that way, but in some ways I did. So, but no, it's a fairly easy almost commute on Southwest Airlines. It's an hour flight, and I live about 15 minutes from the airport in Manchester, and Laurel's about 20 minutes from the airport at BWI. So it can actually work out pretty well if you time it just right to be at the same place. But you're right. You'll see me bouncing around all over the country quite a bit.
Pretty good.
Yeah, thanks. Pretty suicidal is actually what it is, but it is what it is. So good question, though. Any other questions from folks out in TV land? It's a really good crowd today, by the way.
Hey, TK, this is Gary.
Hey, Gary.
Yeah, sorry, I wanted to join online, but I had basketball games and I'm driving. So.
Yeah, no problem.
Thanks. Give us some. I'm trying to figure out what is the advantage, other than more money in the till, of partnering with other partnerships, because you kind of lose, your ability to make decisions that you think is good for the partnership, because you have more people that are putting in their ideas. So just talk about why you feel, Wasabi going with other partnerships is a good thing.
It's a great question, Gary. First of all, what I would say is one thing is it does spread the risk a little bit if you think of a portfolio management sort of thing. So that's one thing, and it can't be ignored. Two, if you have the right partner, it isn't. And once again, anytime you have partners, you don't get to make the sole decisions anymore, as you already pointed out. But if you had the right partner, like for example, our relationship with Kenwood is a very good relationship. I mean, Rob, who's the managing partner over there, I communicate all the time about the horses, and he often asks, and in some cases in the Kenwood horses that we have partnerships with, in some cases we're the predominant owner, and in some cases they're the predominant owner. We kind of flip back and forth depending on the situation. That's why honesty and transparency, I think, is very important. The only other thing that I would say, which trying to answer your question is that sometimes you can learn things from other people, and having partners especially people who have been successful, you can learn things. And if it helps your knowledge base as an organization, I think that's valuable in itself as well.
All right, thanks. I have a different question.
Yep.
Share with people. I know, like, a lot of people, when they evaluate whether or not they want to get into partnerships, and the one question came in, who are your trainers? Talk about the benefits of having good trainers that aren't household names.
I think it's a great question. So I'll make it less. I'll rephrase your question a little bit, Gary, but get to the same answer, which is, we think it's really, really, really important that we work with trainers. This is another requirement for us. We're working with trainers who are hands-on horse people, 100% hands-on horse people, meaning they don't have a bunch of subordinates who do all the work, and they show up occasionally because they have horses at 5 different tracks and scattered out throughout the country. Working with trainers who are in the barn every day and actually physically work with the horses gives you a very different relationship with that trainer. Once again, I don't think there's anything that can be more valuable than having a trainer who's honest and transparent with you. That's probably, once again, you've heard me say this 100 times tonight about honesty and transparency. It's as important in the trainers as it is in partners and anything else. But a hands-on trainer, which is kind of what Gary's describing, non-household names, if you will, is very key. And I can't tell you, I can tell you this, no time in the near future, or ever, in my opinion, will we ever work with a trainer who isn't a hands-on horse person, which probably means Bob Baffert is no longer an option for us. Not that you're surprised. Did that answer your question, Gary?
Yes, it does. Thanks, PK.
All right, no problem. Any other questions from folks out there in TV land? All right.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say that's a good point, because I noticed that, like, Penn National, for example, a lot of times you'd have like an assistant trainer or some kind of helper in the paddock or the winter circle, and the trainers in the programs nowhere to be found. So that's a really good point by him.
Yeah, and it's not only on race day, because sometimes in race day there are reasons why you may have an assistant trainer who's saddling. I mean, there's perfectly good reasons. You're running a horse at Delaware Park. You're not based at Delaware Park, and you have a horse running, and the trainer has a horse running at the same time in Maryland. It's perfectly legitimate to send someone else to saddle the horse race day. What's more important, though, is in the morning, is that trainer with the horses wherever they're being trained in the morning. And when you call and say, hey, how is horse XYZ doing today? They can know, because they're physically sitting there and they spend every morning with them. And they can know, he was a little lethargic today. Not really sure why. Maybe he's coming down with something, because they don't have 72 horses in the barn. They got 15 or 8 or 6 or 20, but, they can manage 20 horses. When you run into trainers that have 70, 100, 150 horses in the barn, that'd be like having 150 kids. There isn't much chance that you know much about the 150 kids. Did that help answer your question too? Cool. Great. Any other questions from folks out there?
It's not a question, TK, but something that you can share with people about the struggles of owners with the racing office and races that fit your horse so that they can run.
Yep.
I mean, I've been a horse player for 50 years, and you look at a racing form and you say, why hasn't this horse run in the last 2 months? And the short answer before you get into explaining it is the conditions of the race, may have come up, but the racing office, there wasn't enough horses that drew in. So could you just expand on that as far as people wondering why a particular horse only runs once a month versus a couple times a month?
Yeah, great question. So I mentioned the condition book earlier, and I showed you one, and I'm holding it up again. Just because something's in the condition book doesn't mean that race goes. The racing office takes the entries, and then they sort of figure out which races they're going to fill. And it really usually comes down to how many horses enter. And they want, the bigger the field, the better it is for betting purposes. And obviously they're making their money off the betting. So it is pretty difficult. There's depending on what your horse is and where it needs to run, it can be very difficult to get the race you want to run when you want to run it. So, for example, I'll tell you point blank, and it didn't help this year. Early this year, so far this year, the weather has been ridiculously bad on the East Coast. So lots of days have been canceled altogether. But we had the perfect race scheduled for New Year's Day for Feel Proud. The absolute perfect race for him. And the race didn't go because they canceled the day. Now we're having him come back in a race that's not perfect for him, but we're hoping he can shine. So it really, sometimes you have to run. I mean, and you got to run horses. If not, we talked about the day rate earlier in the call. If you don't do that, the day rate, it still mounts up every month, and you don't make any money if you don't run the horse. So sometimes you got to run them in less than the perfect race, and just to get a race in. So it's a problem in the industry as a whole. There just aren't as many horses as there once was. But in some ways, that's a slight bounce back in other places. We're having an increase in number of foals being born in Maryland this year because the program's done so well. So hopefully a couple of years from now, that's less of a problem.
Because it's cold in Maryland.
It's cold. It is. It's cold everywhere, man. So that's although it's warmed up a little bit in the last day or so. Cool. Any last questions before we call it a fine evening? All right. Great. Well, thanks everybody for coming out. We are going to post this to YouTube. And I appreciate everybody coming out tonight, and hopefully those of you who are not members who are on the line, I hope you come in and be a club member. I hope you find that our transparency and honesty and general fun is something that you want to be a part of. And I think we're going to do some really interesting and fun things this year, and I hope you're all a part. So with that, enjoy your evening, and talk to you all soon.
Great. Thank you, TK.
Thank you, TK.
Bye-bye.